So, good afternoon, my name is David. I'm part of the ProVideo team here at Scan Computers. We work very closely with companies within the industry, media and broadcasting, VFX and post houses. And, we're very much sort of driving bespoke kits involving workstations and solutions as well. We get asked a lot of questions about hardware, which is understandable, and one of the key ones at the moment is around virtual production. And today I'm really happy to say I'm with Ben, who's part of the team at NightSky in Scotland. So what we're going to look to do today is answer some of the most common questions that we both get asked, and then hopefully we can maybe instill people with some information that they can take away and see if virtual production is for them. So I suppose, Ben, if you'd like to do a quick brief introduction.
Hi, so I am Ben Bentley. I'm one of the studio executives at NightSky Studios up in Glasgow. We are a film and TV complex. We've got a number of studio spaces up there as well as a virtual production arm. So we build pop-up stages and do consultation and installs for universities, colleges, that sort of thing. So that's a little bit about us. We've been going for a couple of years and kind of spent the majority of the time trying to work out how to make virtual production work for shoots and hit budgets.
That's fantastic, thanks for that. I suppose, just to get us started, it might just be nice to go a very high-level view of virtual production as a whole and how you describe that.
Yeah, so virtual production, I guess, it's a collective of different skill sets that have kind of come together. So you've kind of got the games development side of things, you've got traditional filmmaking, you've got architecture, you've got a bit of all of that is all coming together to make what is now classed as virtual production, which is kind of a catch-all term for a number of different disciplines. So you can look at things like green screen and live compositing, you can go down the large video wall route, which is what most people think of, or you can do it in post. It's kind of a catch. There are multiple ways to do the same thing, but it's all about the integration of the technology and the integration of how you are able to expand worlds and make stories come to life, basically.
Lovely. Very nice. Obviously you mentioned about going from the green screening, live compositing, and then to the volume, which obviously people see and think that's all that virtual production is. Maybe you could just explain a little bit about the volumes themselves, and some of the most common questions, maybe regarding size, shape, and pixel density.
So when it comes to that traditional volume, if you will, of the big horseshoe curve voluminous thing, which I guess is where the name volume came from, most of that has been driven by what has been released out there, which in the current climate has been The Mandalorian. I think is probably the most famous one that we can all talk about, which has been both the best and the worst thing to happen to virtual production. It's the best because it shows that there's a commercial viability of shooting that way, and that you can actually use it to do a shoot in front of, which is something 5 years ago would have been impossible. The downside of that is that now everybody assumes that it is that expansive wall, when in reality it's the tech should never really be the thing that's guiding what your creative choice is. So the way that NightSky look at it and the way that we deal with it is that we go, okay, what are you trying to achieve? Let's work back from that. Let's do some simple pre-visualization of what you're looking to shoot. Let's talk through what you're actually trying to capture, and we'll start to build volumes to match what that is. So we've done stuff that's as small as a 1 meter by 1 meter square outside of a window, up to 20 by 5. We're currently putting together a quote for a 30 by 7 for a long-running production. So it can be that, and it can be anything in between. It's the thing that we have spent a lot of our time and a lot of our effort into trying to educate productions and the people who control the purse strings on how they can get the most out of it, not just go, here's a video wall, good luck. So a lot of that is just outreach, and a lot of that is really trying to demystify what virtual production is and how you're able to use it. Because that's, at the end of the day, it's a great technology, but it's just a tool that you use to do production. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's it can help in certain situations, but it can also hinder in others. And it's understanding what the pros and cons of all of it are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like you say, I think the power of virtual production is clearly there to be seen, and there's many benefits. Obviously, we'll maybe ask that a subsequent question. You mentioned obviously about the Mandalorian, obviously the large scale size of that, but when we're talking to people, obviously it's not always that size. And for me, it's how do we educate in people using small to medium sized volumes and the use cases there?
I think it's a lot about understanding what they're doing and what they would like to achieve. And I'll sound like a broken record through this, where I keep going back to the fundamental question is, what are you trying to achieve, and let's work down from that rather than going, okay, here is a volume, let's work out what you're going to shoot on it. The Mandalorian has again, using it as an example, is it was a solution to a problem, which was that the main protagonist in that was essentially a walking mirror. So you had to have all of that coverage around him to show the reflections, to show lighting details as they're bouncing off. Most people don't need that. So let's look at what it is you're trying to shoot and work out what that needs to be to allow you to achieve it. So that a lot of the time when we speak to clients, they start with something considerably bigger than they need. They see the cost of it and go, oh, that's quite expensive. And we go, great, let's stop talking about this. Let's look at what your shot list is. Let's look at what the story is, and let's look through it and work out what are the parts in your script that would benefit from it, but what are the parts that we think you should still go and shoot on location or shoot green screen or any of the other options that are out there. It is just another tool that filmmakers have to be able to make their creative vision come to life. The most exciting thing about it is that it's interactive and they can see it in real time. So you get a better, essentially a better acting from your actors because they can see what happens. If you're sitting in a green screen studio and you go to 5 people who are standing on the floor, okay, let's all look at this. There's a spaceship coming from behind you that's going to crash. Let's have a look at it. You're going to have 5 different people looking in different places. Whereas on a video wall, you're all looking at the same thing. So it starts to feed into that, let's make it more interactive and make it feel more like you're on location, but give you the ultimate control down to like, what time of day is it? What's the weather? Are you going to be shooting, again, to sort of go off on a sidetrack, we're currently coaching with somebody who they're looking at building on an Arctic base. Obviously, going to an Arctic base would be quite expensive for 20 weeks of shoot. We can do it in a studio in Glasgow for 6 weeks because we don't have to transfer them all the way out there. So there are savings to be made, but using cost as the reason to do it is difficult because the cost of it is how big is a piece of string. It can be as expensive or as cheap as you need it to be. There are so many products out there, and as you start to get through that, the understanding what the actual infrastructure is that goes into making a volume work, you can find all of the different price points of all of the parts through each step of it and really tailor it to fit your budget. If you're doing stuff that's big, wide, establishing shots, you probably don't need millimeter accuracy tracking because you're not really going to see that. Whereas if you're doing small little detail stuff, you probably do need it. So that's just a big broad brushstroke of what are the sort of things that you can look at. But it can range anywhere, but there's always a way to make it fit budget, basically, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I like how you answered a question I didn't ask there about cost. So well done there, absolutely. I think you made a good point about the visualization. I think it's not just the actors. I think that obviously directors can see that visualization and the fact that they can change things on the fly as well. I think that's a fantastic piece of technology and how it can be driven. Obviously, you touched on a few more of the benefits. Obviously, there is things like sustainability, of course. But what are some of the challenges or pitfalls potentially by utilising VP production?
So I guess to sort of follow on from what you just said there, one of the interesting parts about it is that you can't just walk into a space and start shooting without any pre-production because it doesn't exist. It's not like when you're on location where if you suddenly go, okay, we actually need to do a turnaround, you just turn around and suddenly the world is still there. If you turn around in VP, there's nothing. So you need to understand what you're actually trying to shoot and understand how much of a world you need to build in the pre-production stage to be able to make that work, which it's a mindset shift from a production perspective, because you're having to start to make decisions earlier than you might necessarily have done it in the previous life. But with rises in things like AI and being able to generate assets quickly, you can maybe start to get out of those pitfalls, but it's not something that is confirmed and you can guarantee it will happen, which starts to make the benefits of VP become a problem in itself. If you've got something that you're last minute, we just need this to happen now, VP might not be the best way to do it. But if you've got a 6-month period of where you're doing pre-production, you're doing production design, or a recurring show, it can be really beneficial in that, because you know what you're looking for. One of the things you said earlier as well about directors is that what we can do in the pre-production stage is put them into a VR headset and have them stand in the virtual space before a video wall is even built, and they can start to block out their shots and what they want to see, and we can then take that data, work back, and then start to go, okay, well, with this move, if you adjust by X amount or Y amount, we can reduce the screen by 15%, which will save you 10% on the overall cost of your budgetary concerns. So there's a lot of tech that is sort of all come to the right place right now that allows us to do this really well and efficiently, as long as we lean into the tech rather than try and shy away from it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Obviously, we are at the media production show this week, but obviously there is many use cases for virtual production, and as opposed to just shooting theatre production. So what sort of other areas and industries have you been sort of working within your studio?
So it's a funny one of where, because I guess because film and TV are quite new to the virtual production world, what they see is that video wall is virtual production. That comparison has started to be made when, our NightSky's background pre-pandemic was we were all in live events doing large format video walls for shows, festivals, Reading, Leeds, Glastonbury, Formula 1, Formula E, all those sort of things. At the end of the day, the biggest takeaway from VP is that with LED, it's just a big telly. It's a phrase that we love to say because it demystifies what's actually going on. It may be 30 meters wide, yes, it may be 7 meters high, whatever you have. It's still being fed from a HDMI feed or a DisplayPort feed, but when you start to understand that, you can start to use it in different ways that might not necessarily have been the initial, okay, this is what a volume is. It's a difficult one to try and quantify what it is, because it can be so many things. So it's, to go back to that phrase that I love to say, it's what you're trying to achieve. Let's work out, are you trying to make something that's a dreamscape where the world is lots of beautiful colors? Well, we can just put video content on the wall that is that. It doesn't have to be that real world photorealistic environments. It can be anything you want. It can be a picture.
Absolutely, indeed. What an expensive screen for a picture, but yeah, why not, indeed?
Yes and no. So a really nice comparison on that there is one of the productions we were working with, they have been using traditional backdrops outside of windows all around their set. We did a bit of a case study with them to work out what would be the cost benefit of doing it on volume, and from an initial cost it was pretty similar, which fine. But what we discovered the more that we spent time on set with them was that none of the production team and none of the shooting team actually enjoyed what it looked like out of the windows. So thus they started to stop shooting out of those windows and make sure that they were always looking inside. So that now means that cost that they had spent outside, it's now never being used, so it's a wasted cost. Whereas when we put a couple of small screens outside, they now were having people standing against windows looking out, and now that whole other side of your set, the fourth wall, if you will, is being used. So suddenly you're giving creatives more ability to be creative and not fixing them into going, oh, well, yeah, we know it doesn't look great outside, but we need to have something there. So it's a very difficult comparison to have of what is the tangible cost to it. It's line item wise, it will lose most of the time, I think, like being honest about it. But when you take into the added benefits of, you know that you're not going to have to shoot night shoots. You're not going to have to be outside on a mountain at 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. I should say, sorry, waiting to get the perfect shot. You're not going to have to worry about being rained off. You're not going to have to worry about moving essentially an army of people from one location to another to do a day's shoot to then come back again. If you do it in studio, you have that ability to go, okay, I need to go to the toilet, I'm going to step off stage and there's a toilet there, rather than having to take a toilet to the middle of nowhere. And it's those little things are where it starts to win. It sounds odd, but that's the bit that can really save productions big amounts of money, is all the little bits that suddenly add up. And I come from a production management background, so those were the things that I used to worry about. So going, hey, I can stay in the same place for 6 months. That means I can now set up an office for that production, be in the same place, not have to move things, not have to pay for swing drivers, not have to pay for overnight shifts, not have to pay for night shoots, not have to pay for overtime, not have to pay for 6th days, not have to pay for 7th days. So it can save a huge amount of money on the ancillary rather than the primary cost, which is, it's a way that a lot of people aren't really talking about VP as, is they say it'll be cheaper, which technically it's not, because it's big and it's expensive. But all the other savings, yeah, suddenly you're now into real world balance. But the biggest gain is that you have outright control of everything. And that's the real thing that virtual production wins at, is that you can guarantee the sun will be in golden hour for 9 hours a day if that's what you need. You want to go back and do a pickup shot 6 months later, if you save that environment, and which good practice would be is that you can build exactly the same thing again in 6 months' time and shoot again to fix what your problems were. The benefit of that is, if you know what the problem was, you can also now reduce that volume right the way down to something that is just covering what that shot is. So again, the cost of building up a whole stage set to reshoot something doesn't matter. You can take that down, which then means from a studio hire perspective, you're saving more money again. So it's an interesting one of where the overall cost is a bit fluid in what it actually is, but you can save it if you know what you're doing. And that's what we try and do, is try and educate people as much as we can, and this is the process you need to go through. If you do this, then 6 months down the line we can say you'll have saved X amount of money if you follow what the plan is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that very much that moving away from a capital expenditure to more OPEX, and I suppose it's how people in the industry are educated and how that works long term.
Totally. It's everything about this is education. You know, it's why we are here at MPTS doing this, is because it's outreach. It's showing what we as companies are able to help people achieve what they're trying to do, and that's, you know, it's without getting too gushy into it, working with Scan is a joy. You know, we buy our hardware from the 3XS team because we know what we're going to get. We know we can rely on you guys when something goes wrong, because it inevitably will. Hardware is a problem. Something will always break, but being able to go, hey guys, we've got a node down, we need this for tomorrow, can you sort us out? The answer has always been yes, which is glorious, because we punish the machines that you lovingly build for us.
That's good to hear, absolutely indeed. And I think vice versa as well. I think obviously, you know, when we build our specifications dedicated for VP, it's leveraging the conversations we have with industry standard like yourself to make sure that it is the right specification, and that when people get it, it's going to be the right hardware. Because I think there is still that thing about people wanting to use consumer grade hardware and not knowing the additional hardware that's needed.
It's totally, and that's the thing, is it's a lot of, I guess that sort of comes to the question of what is the barrier of entry to virtual production, and fundamentally it's pretty much nothing. Like Unreal Engine, which is the leading game engine for doing it, is free to have for anybody at the moment. There's a licensing model when you get over a certain amount of revenue, but on the assumption that you're trying to learn it, that's not a problem. It's free. It runs on pretty much anything. You can start to build and do exactly what they did in The Mandalorian in your house now for no cost, which as a creative and as somebody who would love to have done that 20 years ago, it's mind-blowing. You know, the more tools that are starting to be out there that you can get, it helps take that what's in the back of your head as a creative vision and put it into reality. And that's where we have, NightSky and Scan have had a load of conversations about how we help your clients and your customers understand what it is, and then also understand what are the little changes they need to make on their upgrade path to go from where they are now to being able to have a big volume if they want it. And that's the important thing, is that you don't have to go in at the top end. You can start at the bottom, understand what that pipeline is that you're learning, because that's the bit, is the soft skills that go between the hardware and software integration. And what are the next steps? Okay, if we do this next year, we can go to this point. If we do this, then we can go to that point. And in 3 years' time, we can then do this bit of spending and we'll have a video wall. And suddenly it becomes much more attainable to more people, rather than having to go, well, you're going to have to spend X thousands of pounds just to be able to have this, but you don't actually have the infrastructure and the knowledge base inside your institution to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's a really good shout indeed. Like you say, it's not just having to jump straight to the huge volumes. We see it across our AI sort of client base that they feel they need to go and have a supercomputer, and it's very much far from the truth. So it does cross many verticals within who we deal with as well. I suppose one last question. Obviously, people see the volume and they see a camera and they see a bit of tracking, of course. But what are the sort of the other infrastructure points that people need to look at without this being very, very technical?
So, I guess what's probably easiest is to do the big broad brushstroke of what VP is in terms of the ecosystem that you need. Essentially, you have some form of content that is being projected on some form of medium that is then being captured by some sort of camera that is then being fed back into the content. That circle is probably the easiest way to think about it. So in terms of content, that can be 2D plates, 3D plates, fully 3D environments, whatever you want. The projection medium can be green screen, can be a TV, can be a phone, can be a monitor, can be a video wall, can be any of that. It all depends on what size you need. The cameras, the best camera you have is the camera you've got. So you can, if you want to shoot on an iPhone, yeah, sure. If you want to shoot on a DSLR, great. If you want to shoot on a cine camera, great. Whatever that is, you can use. The only part that gets added into that circle to take it to what would be classed as traditional VP is a tracking system. But again, if you have, as an institution, have VR headsets, you can use those as a tracking system. Or you can use your iPhone as a tracking system for Unreal. You can use Moses, which is the company that we use a lot. You can go up to track. All of these price points, or all these products, have got different price points to fit whatever your requirements are. So I guess that's sort of the long-winded way of saying that's the circle that you want to have for VP. Without going into too much tech, it's content, screen, camera, tracking, content, screen, camera, tracking, and that's the circle.
I thought you were a lot more technical than that.
You said keep it simple.
No, it was very simple indeed. No, I thank you. I appreciate your time, Ben. I hope people have been able to understand a little bit more about virtual production. If you have any further questions, please reach out to us at Scan, our ProVideo team, and we'll be happy to help you.